who we see on the trails now, for me anyways, it seems much more diverse than it used to be, right? I'm not riding. I see in my area, I see a lot of Hispanic families and riding. In other areas, the Seattle area, it's a much different variety just because of the diversity of the populations in those areas. And I think the interesting thing is that there are riders out there of color, right? They're there. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is the challenge that they're not part of this greater community yet, mm-hmm. this influencing community, this visible or this sort of leadership community of the sport. And so the thing that got me thinking about that is the genuine question. And grabbing the three of you because you happen to be there or whatever, hey, can you guys get in this photo for me? That'd be great. And then you show up and you're like, where's all my people? I don't understand this. So I think that's one of the things that I guess in one sense it's a positive, because I'm seeing, from my perspective anyways, I'm seeing that when I'm out on the trail, I'm not just seeing me out there, I'm seeing a whole variety of people. But also it's maybe that other opportunity of bringing somehow, and I think that's what we're talking about, whether it's through our boards or through different opportunities, bringing the groups into this higher level where it's not just to grab somebody and get in the picture, they're actually there and influencing what's going
on. I have kind of dealt with this a decent amount because this question I think has come up for the last 2 years of in different kind of contexts, which is how do we hire? How do we do this stuff? And one of the reasons that Grow Cycling was started was it's a recognition of that there are no relationships built. And so I would say that it actually does take work to make the relationships. And so you go to the places and you have to say, hey, I'm Eliot. How are you? Right. And get to know people. Because we saw this problem with the jobs board. So one of the things the jobs board does is try to connect community with employers. And it was kind of like a middle school dance where we would just be like, you guys are on opposite side of the room. Let's get you closer. And then the companies would get closer and they'd be like, well, can you just give us someone? We'd be like, okay, cool. Here's someone. We'd be like, did you interview them? How did it go? Yeah, I don't know. They didn't really have this on their resume and things like that. And so that's why I highlighted the Santa Cruz relationship, is because it took work for them to do the things that they were doing, to say, who is Eliot, get to know who Eliot was. And that is what led to things like this. And so I think it is just an actual conscious effort. Another maybe funnier way to think about it is I feel like people have no practice talking to Black people or different groups of people. And so you just don't know what to do. and it is and so, yeah, if you think about it like that, it's just hey, what's up? I'm going to make friends. Get to know you for you.
And see, the middle school dance is a perfect analogy, because the other piece that I was thinking about that is when I see this on the trails, I don't see, the three of you and the three of us riding together, right? I see the three of you riding, and I see the three of us riding, and you don't often see this mixing, mm-hmm. and it's a natural thing, right? It's just what we do as humans. It's what animals do. Animals is just a natural sort of segmentation, but it's the middle school dance scenario that's just the perfect example of what the challenge is.
I don't want to monopolize
you
here,
go.
but
Okay.
I would say if you think about what is the reason for that, it is what is the culture of those two groups, mm-hmm. and so do I have anything in common with you? Another way to think about it is what is the culture of cycling? And for me to come and hang out with you, do I have to do what you do? Talk about bikes, try to go fast, hit Strava or whatever. And so if you thought about those two things as being different bubbles, it's really cycling would have to expand what it means culturally to be a cyclist, mm-hmm. to say, yeah, man, I can just go and ride with my friends. I can do whatever, right? The making the bike your own thing. And so that is the piece where it can't just be these two circles and you have to do what I do. Or I have to do what you do, right? Like it's both. And so like I think that circle kind of needs to get bigger in terms of just like, and I think it's like when you think about it like that, it's like, oh, it's very obvious, right? Because we have two different ways that we're riding, two different cultures, two different things that we're talking about, and we need to find common ground there, which is the work that the relationship work.
So if you turn up at a new spot, say, and it isn't a diverse spot, so there's a load of middle-aged white guys riding around, which is very normal. Like, what would the ideal experience for you coming into that environment look like? How would you want to be received, treated, involved? Can you give us, does that make sense? Can you give us a bit of a view of what the good experience would look like?
You can go.
I think you have to take a step back from that, because you have to create an environment that feels safe, that feels that you're included. And, maybe we're not there yet. And going back to your point around people on the trail, you've got to think about creating safe spaces for people. And sometimes those safe spaces might be a group where it is only people of colour. And if you can create that environment and bring people in to introduce them to cycling and mountain biking, then, hopefully from there, once you start to get those skills, you get to understand what biking is all about. And then that community in itself connects with other communities, then that's when you will ride together. And that project was Ride Sheffield and ourselves. We were white and black together. So it can happen. It's just, it's going to take time because we need to create that safe space for people to realise that actually mountain biking is for you. So we need to allow that to happen. We need to invest to give that support. Why don't you use the example of, you were telling me yesterday about the white woman coach who came in, and actually helped facilitate some of that.
Yeah, so like a mountain biking mentorship program with Color the Trail started about around 2020 when this woman, Jacqueline, reached out to us. It's like, hey, Judy, it would be really great if I help organize, give back to you guys in terms of creating a big day where we do intro to mountain biking. So we had about 30 people sign up, really cheap, $25. Everybody got we broke it up into 2 sessions, morning and afternoon, 4-hour lesson, bike rental, gear, everything was provided. So we did that and we just got an amazing review. I'll try to pull up the video and just kind of like showcase some of the stuff that we're doing with Color the Trails in that. And then afterwards, Jacqueline and I got talking and we were like, well, we don't want to just like make this a one-day kind of thing. So she's like, okay, let's work together and start a mentorship program where I have access to bikes and I'm also a coach. So I have access to teaching clinics and let me support your community. So together we put up a mountain biking mentorship program, which is going on its 3rd year this year. And just like as a small business, that relationship and that support has been immense for Color the Trails. Like our mountain biking program is the most competitive program to get into. We're partnering with brands to be able to support us, so that when our mentees come into a program, they're getting all of the gear that they need. So that's reducing barrier. They're having cheap bike rental. So she owns a bike shop. So she gives our discounts like $40 to rent a bike. For 24 hours. And that's reducing a barrier. And then through her, if people want to purchase a bike as well, there's like a rent to own where instead of coming up with $4,000 or $5,000 to buy a bike, you have 12 months to be able to slowly pay it off. So all these things are creating accessibilities. It's allowing us to engage in mountain biking in a way that it wouldn't be possible without her support. And she's just like a small business that's doing this versus other business or trail association are not even helping us in that capacity. And we include clinics as well to a point where we work with Whistler Bike Park, where we send people to bike parks to, do bike park days. We go to Sun Peaks, which is in Kamloops in the interior. And we're just seeing this growth. And in terms of connecting, as you mentioned, how do you connect? like we found mentorship is the best way to connect, because our riders are riders of color and our mentors oftentimes are white folks. And it's women and men that are mentors, and that bridging that gap and bringing those two demographic of people that may have never been able to connect, we're seeing is having a positive impact, because now it's allowing people to go on ride, talk, engage, and build a community around that in a way that is, because the mentors that come through our programs understand the mission of Color the Trails about creating inclusion and being sensitive and being respectful and creating safe spaces. And that is bridging that gap, and it's bringing people together. So
what do you think, like, I feel like the mentorship, it like sounds good in practice, but then like, you know, if Kristen was like, hey, yo, just gonna be your mentor.
Talks about is kind of quite structured and organized, and that requires people to be doing that work. And there are some great examples of that, of which a lot of people in this room are. But that's not everywhere, and it's not all the time. And I guess what I'm asking is more like, what's the education that regular riders need so that we can do the best possible job when people that aren't familiar with that space that we inhabit all the time at the moment come in? Like, how can we respond in the best possible way? Is it to go up to Eliot and say, hey dude, like, I'm here to help you. I did race the podcast. Like, how do we approach it?
It's a
question.
Yeah.
So, working on DEI projects over the last few years, I'm white, and I'm working on this project, and I have to constantly check myself. Like, am I thinking how this community thinks? So, I pick up the phone and call a friend, kind of like what you're referring to, and I don't always have that opportunity to call a friend and get some insights within this community. Sometimes I go to a coffee shop and meet that community and talk to them and get those insights. But for us to learn how to communicate and think about checking ourselves and picking up the phone and calling a friend to get your insight and advice and intuitions.
Like, how would you want to be treated? How can we make the chance that you're going to come back to that spot and want to come again and have a good experience?
Think about how would you want to be treated?
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah.
So, everybody wants to talk. You go, Judy.
No, I think it's a very hard question to ask or to give an answer to, because it all gonna depend, right? In terms of how we individually want to be approached, because I've been in spaces where, you know, I've gone to, like, let's say a women festival for mountain biking, and, you know, and we're trying our best to be included within that, but then the aggression that we're even experiencing within white women kind of led initiative, where we're constantly being asked, like, where you're from, or you have an accent. There's all these things that, and then, you know, the group of us then decided to stick together because we're like, hey, we came here to ride and have fun and connect, but we're constantly being interrogated and being asked all these questions. Like, it's no longer a safe space, so it's just best we create our own little bubble and just like ride, because we came here to ride, not to be integrated and be asked XYZ.
Probably means you work it back.
Yeah, exactly. And just like, you know, so for me, I think it's like, how do we ourselves like create a space and opportunity that we just go for a ride? Like, I get people who DM me, it's like, Judy, I want to ride with you. I was like, yeah, sure, let's go for a ride. And it's like, do that. But I think it's just like how you approach, and most people can decide and sense like where you're coming from. And how to even open that doors. I don't think there's a formula, but I think is if you're genuine and you're authentic in your approach, people can sense that, and you can cultivate that relationship and bring folks on.
And I think maybe like a tactical way that I kind of like to think about that is like, what's like one question lower that you could ask? And so like if I would normally ask a question around like an activity of like, man, when'd you get your bike? Like, or, you know, like, oh, are you, yes, this hill is really hard, right? Or like, nice job or something like that. It's kind of like a question around like how you're engaging with the activity. which is maybe going to be different for all of us. So if you go like kind of one level deeper to like a human element and saying like, man, it's weather's pretty nice out here, like you know, like where are you from, like all of these things where you can actually start to have a genuine relationship, which means that you can include more people, because those questions are by definition kind of more inclusive rather than kind of circling them around this way that I would like to. Because I mean, 3 of us, right? Like Aneela talked about it, like we're not homogenous, and like there's we're talking about race here, but there's all these different groups, and so we have to say that you know, maybe the way that I engage with this activity is different, and how can I maybe connect on a more human level.
And the other thing you can do is check your privilege. It's like exactly what you're saying, check your own privilege, and thinking about your role as an ally as well. And you know, ways in which you can use your own privilege to empower others. So it's not always about, oh, what do we need to do for the community? It's about what do we need to do for ourselves as well, to enable that space to feel safe, to feel open, so that when you are having these conversations, you're not making people feel othered. And what I mean by that is exactly what you're saying, is that actually you come into a space and you're interrogated or you're asked the questions. I mean, I've been asked on the trail, you know, oh, I've been not asked, I've been told, oh, your English is very good. So, you know, and actually, and I just...
I disagree.
And actually, I gave that example in a training session with a particular organisation, and they interrogated me, because they said, oh, maybe because they just thought that the words you were using were intelligent, or just maybe, and I just thought, I cannot believe that I'm talking about my experience on the trail and you're attacking me and by saying that didn't happen to me. It's almost like a denial that racism exists.
Yeah.
You know, so that sense of allyship is going back to that slide around EDI advocacy. What can you do every day for you to allow people to feel safe on the trails as well?
So, like, creating safe spaces is, you know, like you said, there's also, if you're talking about protected characteristics and things like that, there are things, you know, so people with sort of neurodiverse and you know, LGBTQ and things like that, and just that, and then just for some people, you know, just coming into that thing being nervous or being, you know, people aren't as confident, you know, even things like that. If you've got mental health issues, if you've got any of those things that you come into the space and you want it to feel accepted, and sometimes, you know, it's just the language we use, and like I just think quite often it's quite a macho, aggressive language that we use. That's kind of the default, and like maybe, you know, sometimes, you know, I'm kind of shy sometimes, and I find, like, you know, certain situations, I'm not a blokey bloke. I don't like those situations. I don't like that kind of situation. I don't enjoy it at all. I find it really challenging. But to me, it's like, you know, I'll just avoid that situation, or see how, you know, younger riders, or how different, you know, how different people come into different spaces, you know, actually for kids, or, you know, I thought what you said, like in the Tweed Valley, what's amazing is all the kids clubs. Actually, why there's so many young people riding, and why those spaces are, you know, part of that culture in the Tweed Valley, to me, I see it's from having, you know, a lot of development for young people as well.
Aside from the cycling aspect of it, you know, our organization does the trail building and trail maintenance. And one of the issues that we had is we built an adaptive trail. And as part of one of the grants that I was going to apply for, is they wanted me to reach out to the community, to have the community involved in planning and designing this adaptive trail. And I was kind of flummoxed basically how to do that, because, you know, the planning and designing that we do, we go out in the woods and we ground truth, and we're on, you know, the side of the mountain that's really rugged territory. And you know, we need to have the trail so they can access this area. And I was just sort of, any ideas?
Yeah, I think in this situation, it would be like not trying to do everything yourself. And so there are, like, I won't say it's solved, but like adaptive trails are kind of a solved problem. And so there are experts. And so because you're not part of the community, like that space, like you wouldn't know who the experts are, which is totally fine. But it would be about kind of networking your way there. And so like reaching out to an adaptive rider and saying like, what are the best adaptive trails that you've seen? They give you a recommendation, and then you say, hey, like Whistler Mountain Bike Park, who did you get to build your adaptive trails? And so then you have these expert adaptive trail builders who can then come in and consult with you, rather than saying, and again, like every single adaptive person would know how to build a trail, or we need to start from scratch and build up this muscle ourselves. And eventually you can build up that muscle if you'd like to, but there's like a bunch of groups. Kind of one of the things that we thought about a lot when we were first getting started is like everyone was like, how do we implement DEI in our company? And how do we do these things? And it's like, man, there are so many people doing so much good work in the world, but like the relationship is not there. And so you get this thing where people reinvent the wheel over and over and over. So I would think like, you know, just trying to network your way there and like ask as many people as you can to say like, what does it mean to build an adaptive trail? Who's the expert? Who can I consult with? How do I?
Including you can talk to the Santa Cruz Trails, Matt and Maddie yesterday, that one of those trails we were on was going to be an adaptive trail thing. So those guys have already done all the legwork. You can reach out to them as well.
Yeah, we've already done legwork. We kind of built the trail. What I was flummoxed about was how to find an adaptive rider that could get out, because the way the grant was, they wanted them out in the woods doing the planning and doing work on that. And that's where I was. It had to be a disabled person to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
But I'm sort of thinking through the issue is we really just need to ask the question to somebody, right? It's not-
Absolutely.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
You know, just in,
Yeah.
because it's like how do we bring more people of color? You know, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out, and it's like I don't go, hey, Eliot, how do I bring more people of color?
Do you know anyone?
I mean, Judy and I had this conversation yesterday about an event that I put on, and I invited them to. The timing didn't work out, but that was,
Yeah.
you know, we wanted to bring a different group to the
And
event.
then she could be like, we can't go, but bloody so and so can come and whatever.
But there are there are people like ourselves that can open up the opportunity to engage with those communities. That's one of the reasons why we're doing the work that we do, is to build that momentum, to grow those communities. And the same thing happened actually. So we've been talking about adaptive bikes in the Tweed Valley, and we've got a small community group together because we were thinking we don't actually have very many accessible trails. And so one of the things that we decided was we thought who could be involved in this process and speaking to the forestry about one of the trails that they're currently designing. And it was just thinking about the community, asking who's around. So one person we know that, unfortunately had a mountain bike accident and is paralysed from the neck down. But we brought him into the conversation, so and that sort of stemmed from myself to him, and then he's brought in another disabled person that actually now we're starting to build a voice, and that now has people are aware of that voice. And now we're inputting to the South of Scotland's mountain biking and cycling strategy, and they're being asked to come and give their voice and give their opinion to that. So who are the gatekeepers? Who are the kind of community influencers out there that might help you to get to those people that you feel need to be part of the process?
I think for us in our situation where we are, because what it is, it's our first New Jersey's first adaptive trail that I got with. But based on the parameters and the requirements and the specifics of the situation, it can only be built one way, and it can only be built in this situation. We built it to the specs that were written by Kootenai. I think you had help in that, Kootenai Adaptive. And I reached out to riders to get involved in this, but as that grant was writing the adaptive, my concern was mentioned about authenticity. And if I brought someone in at a period on that and say, well, what do you want? What can you do? Or what can you do that? When in reality, the result is kind of somewhat dictated already by the parameters and restrictions we have on the product.
Oh.
Would it be inauthentic for me to sort of solicit that opinion?
Yeah, well, you can't bring people in after. You know, you're right. You've got to have people as part of the process. So that's inclusive, being inclusive by design, and thinking about inclusivity while you're designing, and thinking about the structure of the trail, and bringing people in to help advise on how to do that. So it's kind of back to front. It's kind of back to front, but it's okay as well, and to still bring people into the process. They will tell you, yeah, it's too late, but at least you've engaged with them, and sometimes even to just pay people for their time, and make them feel valued, and to know their worth, is an important aspect. And people don't feel like it's just tokenistic. If you pay them as well, then that in itself is a really important aspect of all of this work, because we get asked to do things all the time, right? We get asked to do things all the time, and to be that voice. But it is about empowering others as well through that process. So remember why you're asking people, but at the same time you're empowering them to be part of that conversation.
And I feel like it's back to what Judy was saying, and I mentioned the false advertising. When you say, hey, I'm bringing you in as a consultant, you're not
And then not listening.
I mean, like, I'm consulting, but like I actually have no impact.
Yeah.
I had this. Yeah, I mean, you have it in so many different places. Like I had it as an athlete. Like a company would be like, we've got this prototype, we're gonna test it out or whatever. They bring an athlete a bike, and then you're like, cool. I think we should change this and that. Like, actually, the mold's already done. It's going into production, and so I think that a lot of the times, what impact.
Yeah.
Can I actually make impact on the process?
Can we talk about that? Because I think that if in that scenario, if they were transparent with you and saying, we may already be behind the ball on this, but we would still like to get your feedback or get your...
I mean, I think that's amazing. Like, that's totally fine, right? Like, I mean, and then we can have a conversation. Like, it's not bad to have a conversation. And then I would say, okay, cool. Maybe next time we can do this. Or like, actually, I've been in this situation before, I've been in this part of the process, and like, here's a couple little levers we can pull that'll kind of make it even a little bit better, even at this step of the process. Or I could say like, like, thanks for checking in, but like, there's nothing we can do, just cruise and do what you're doing. Like,
I think what we're starting to hear here is it's okay to be imperfect.
Yes.
Yes,
As
that's
long
what I
as
said.
you're genuine with your intention.
Absolutely.
And then you take it and learn from it and do better next time. You know, in the political realm, I'm so sick of people saying like, it's a choice between two evils, you know, the lesser of two evils. I'm like, well, take fucking less evil. if you're that cynical, right? So,
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing that while working with Eliot and Aneela, that we found how complex this really is. There's no easy answers. There's no like quick fixes. There's nothing. It's a lot of hard work, and it's just a million little things that you kind of realize when people were asking us, "Oh, you guys should figure out how to donate bikes to, you know, like underrepresented communities." And Eliot's just like, "You can't do that. Like, you can't give a kid a bike that has nowhere to ride a bike, that has nowhere to store a bike, that doesn't know how to maintain a bike. Just handing them a bike doesn't do them anything. In fact, it's like an albatross, right? Like, it's a pet, kind of what you were saying with the principal. You mentioned the same sort of thing. And so, like, all these little things, like every time we come, there's somebody that brings up something that, oh, we could do this. There's so many reasons that like, okay, well, it doesn't really work that way.
and I mean, I think that was the same, I think what my presentation was on, right? Is like, we don't know everything either. And so we came into a community and we had to start from scratch and say, what's going on here, right? Like, because we came in to the city and city council and the school board and said, we want to put this stuff in. They're like, no, we don't want that. And it's like, okay, like, or not just that we don't want that, but like, why is this interesting for us? And we have an idea, as all of us do, around what that means and what our kind of access has been and ideas that we have. And so we have to do the exact same thing, right? Like, I have to reach out to adaptive riders. I have to talk to different genders and things like that. Like it's all about trying to learn and get more expertise and not think that I'm gonna be the expert on every single thing. It's just impossible.
And circling back to the original question, I think that even though you have the standards and like the trail is going to be built, how the trails can be built, because that's the way the trails are required to be built. The opportunity is to bring in that community and number one, say, are you able to get to this trail? Is this a trail that you guys want to be at? You know, you can build the trail part, no problem, but it's like, yeah, that's a great spot, but the trailhead sucks. And we don't have the access that we need for that. I mean, I don't know what it is.
Literally, I was riding with an adaptive rider last week, and it's like, okay, we gotta see first if you can get through the gate. You know?
Right.
And the gate was made to ADA standards, but his adaptive vehicle was wired. So we had to cut through a quad hole, to whole fence. That's how we accessed the park. But you know, we go back to our land manager, I don't know what we're gonna do to fix it, but we'll fix it.
And then kind of a follow up on that, when you were planning the trail, if you wanted to take somebody out there, there's multiple opportunities to kind of create that experience. You could have had somebody walking and live streaming with somebody on a call if there was internet reception or cell phone reception. Some adaptive riders would be up for going out on a horse and doing a survey if that was an opportunity. Some adaptive riders, there's been the opportunity to put somebody in a backpack and take them out. There's just like stuff we usually don't think about, out of the box ways.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I didn't know any of that, so I'd like, and yeah, so I'd have to like ask. I would have to ask.
There's a trail builder in the southeastern part of the U.S. Nature Trails, I think their company is, and one of their technicians got injured, and they connected with a company that makes off-road capable wheelchairs. So he takes that, goes up to his excavator, builds the trail, and uses that to get back down. So there's always a way, but I think you've just got to be open to having that conversation in a transparent way, and just, I don't want to wear my ignorance as a badge, but just be honest that it is that ignorant, and just ask the question.
You got to be honest.
Is this okay? Is this, do you have any input here? And get a reaction and thinking. And I think just that threshold there of you're open to the engagement, you understand your privilege or your ignorance, and then let them, you know, react in the manner that's comfortable for them and engage in their level of comfort, and then things will develop from there, and it won't be overnight, and there will be work involved. It's just, you know, but that work's got to come from both sides, and you've got to be willing to accept that hardship to gain that trust to be able to bring them into the fold.
And there's two things there around curiosity and collaboration, you know, and always asking the question. I think it's great what you said. We will make mistakes through the process, and that's okay. You know, it's lovely what you said on there about, you know, the fact that that's part of the learning process, it's part of the journey. So yeah, I think it's we need to stay curious, but be genuine with it. But always asking and listening, thinking about somebody else's lived experience. Our experience is going to be very different from somebody else's. How do we know what their experience is going to be? So we have to bring people with us. We have to ask them the question: how would you like a trail to be designed? You know, what would you like to see? What are your barriers? Because we're like, you know, my privilege is I'm able-bodied. So I need to look at what can I do to make sure that the people that don't have that privilege can have their voice heard as well, because we live in an able-bodied society. So we disabled people experience barriers. So it's almost like we're trying to reverse things so that they've got an equal voice in this process, and recognising that sometimes it's society that disables people, not their medical condition, but in the way that we don't think about disability in an equal way.
creating opportunity and thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
So Jeremy McGee and I were building an adaptive trail, and he was on site to help me do. We were designing together, building obstacles together, and he was in his adaptive bike while we were on machines. And he's like, "Man, I don't feel like I'm doing much." I'm like, "Oh shit! All right, I'm putting you in the skid steer, and you're moving all the dirt." And he's like, "I can't do that." I'm like, "Yeah, you can. We're sticking you in that machine, and you're going. You have the ability to do that." He's like, "I'm scared." I got you. We put him in the machine. 10 minutes later, he's running loads of dirt, back and forth across the site, and he's so stoked to be involved in that process.
Yeah.
So putting people into the process,
Yeah, yeah.
and including making that inclusivity is an opportunity we can create.
Yeah,
Which-
there's also a lot of fear in those moments, whether it's a simple conversation or making that offer. And it goes back to the kind of social media disaster that can happen. Like, and the comment about you're going to make mistakes. Like there is going to be, you'll have the best intentions, and you'll make that moment, and then there'll be some jogger or something that sees that, and they're like, "They got this guy. They threw him in a piece of equipment, and then they'll just completely flip this on you." You're just like, and that creates a hesitancy, I think, in our culture to engage in that opportunity that's right in front of you. Like, man, this could go really well, or this could really like just be like a yell.
I think if there wasn't that though, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of the whole.
Yeah, I think we have to learn that we don't always have, not everybody has to agree with the things we're gonna do. We can be excited about the things we're gonna do and have people shit on it and just say, yeah, well, I don't care if you think I'm gonna keep doing it.
Yeah, like I have people who
Can't be
don't
stopped.
like what I do. They don't think Color the Trail should exist. They think that, we need to get rid of racism first before we bring people in the outdoors. And I was like, good luck with that mission. But I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing because, I'm like.
So sit on the couch for a little bit. We kind of blow over.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about how you started Color the Trail? You touched on it earlier, but can you just start just bring up, give your backstory a little bit.
Backstory. I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Left there in the 90s due to the conflict. My family moved to South Africa, Australia. I was in the US for 10 years, could not secure permanent residency. So we have family in Canada who sponsored us as refugees to Canada. So I was there, went to school, studied international development, history and gender studies, was gonna be a diplomat, but then got a little taste of politics, and I was like, I can't do this anymore, because I spent time in the Middle East studying a lot there, but I was like, I can't do this anymore. Was working in a coffee shop and reading a lot of books in my free time, just about diversity and inclusion in the outdoors, because I was in Vancouver hiking on weekends, but was seeing a lot of diversity on trails, but when it came to the marketing aspect of things, I wasn't seeing much diversity at all. And this is Vancouver, where there's Arc'teryx, all these major brands who are in Vancouver, but it wasn't representing the Canadian demographic. So I ended up calling into conversation a few brands at that time, just be like, hey, like, when I go out, I see diversity, but when you market, there's no diversity at all. And Canada is a very diverse country, so we're very proud of that, but I was like, I don't see that being represented. Ended up working with one brand for 2 years after that, but it was a very tokenistic relationship. There wasn't much support in terms of supporting Color the Trails to bring people out. It was more of like wanting to seem diverse. Even got an apology from the CEO of that company, but it was very tokenistic. So I honestly founded Color the Trails as a means of being in Vancouver. There's a lot of pro athletes that live in Vancouver area, the Sea to Sky corridor. But anytime I personally would go hike with a lot of different groups or do stuff with different groups, everybody was an expert. It felt that way. And then it felt like there wasn't an opportunity for me to learn because this wasn't my lived experience, what people were growing up hiking, doing these things. I was fleeing war. I've seen war firsthand and the impact of that. I've been homeless even here in the US is an impact of that. So my lived experience was very different than most people who grew up in that area. So then I just wanted to create a safe space to bring people who are older, who are curious about the outdoors, give them the opportunity to learn in a safe manner, because I think when you do get older, it's hard to engage in a lot of outdoor activities because you're embarrassed to fall, you're embarrassed to be like, I don't know how to set up a tent. All those different things. There's a sense of shame, like you should be knowing how to do this, but you don't know how to do it. So yeah, I found Color of the Trails is that safe space. And also Vancouver is a lonely city, although there's a lot of people, it's hard to meet people, but also as a means of creating that community because there's really a lack of it. So slowly we just started with just hiking, just to get people comfortable. And then in the winter we got into snowshoeing, and then eventually started merging into different aspects of the outdoors. And then we started doing mountain biking about 3 years ago now. So for me, Color of the Trails is, we do a lot of things. It's not just getting people outside. I think for me, that's me giving back to the community. What we do behind the scenes is way more important. So talking to our government in terms of how do you create opportunity and access in terms of funding, working with brands to remove, having the requirement, for example, you have to be a nonprofit. I was like, let's talk about that. There's a lot of barriers to having to establish a nonprofit, especially in Canada. It's a lot of work. What about the grassroots organization who are mobilizing, getting people outside? How do you fund them and support them to do what they're doing without having that requirement? So we'll be able to change some policies on those with some brands and organizations, as well as, working to create content. That's one thing I was like, there's not a lot of diversity in the content. So Color of the Trails, we hire diverse photographers, videographers. We hire people within our own community to be models. Like we just did something with the government to update their own media. So we hired queer, disabled, Black, Indigenous folks to take part in this. And so we put that as well. So that's what we're doing. And then I also do a bit of consulting on the side. I keep that low because I don't have enough time. Doing a little bit of consulting to work with brands or even businesses in terms of how do you cultivate relationship with the BIPOC community, and then how do you build and mobilize those communities in a way that's not tokenistic, but actually because I think we're all privileged, we all have access, and we all find joy in being outside. So it's like, why not us bring others along to experience that joy? And I always say my activism is always centered on grace, as we kind of talked about, because I don't think we're all perfect. I'm not perfect, but I'm willing to learn and engage so that I can work towards creating a more inclusive space for everyone. And I always say diversity exists. It's always existed. We need to focus on the inclusion part. I think that's the part that's missing. It's how do we be inclusive? And that's what we're kind of focusing on Color of the Trails by putting a lot of different programming forward.
Can I ask how you think we're doing so in the benefits of inclusivity or diversity? Because it often feels like the pitch is kind of, we should be doing this, which I completely agree with. And I think everyone's felt that nervousness of fucking it up, saying the wrong thing, getting called out, all that kind of stuff. What I feel we don't hear a lot about is the potential benefits of all of this. There's no carrot in a way, to pull us in to be like, hell yeah, I'm willing to make that mistake, because if we can get to here, all this cool shit's gonna happen. Do you think we're doing well communicating the upside of this? Because there's upside for everyone.
That's funny you say that. I feel like in my experience and the places I've been around, it's almost been the opposite, where we're trying to sell it in a logical way, where it's diverse boards perform better, this, that, and the other. There was I just went to Shift, for People for Bikes, and the CEO of Camber, Tiffany, I don't know her last name, but she does a lot of consulting with outdoor industry to kind of build strategy into the organization. And she had this slide that said, the diverse leadership, C-suite kind of leadership, companies with diverse boards and diverse leadership were 20% more profitable. And so you'd be like, like, okay, there's like your logical kind of hit kind of thing. One thing that she said about that, which I think is interesting, is it's like, it's not free. And the way I think about that is like, yeah, I can be the best athlete ever. You can be Loic Bruni or Nino Schurter, or, Lance Armstrong. I guess not Lance, but but like, if you don't have the equipment for it, if you put them on a bad bike, they're not going to be able to perform. And so, right, you put a diverse person that's really smart, really capable into a situation where they don't have the tools to succeed, and you don't have that. And so we have like a kind of logical business capitalistic way of thinking about it, which is like, this is a profitable thing to do. You kind of also have like the emotional aspect of it, which is like, this room, all of us are from many different places, and the ideas and the thoughts that we bring to these discussions, the discussions that we were having yesterday, is really valuable. And so I think from that perspective, it's kind of sold like that.
I don't feel like it is for the regular person out riding in the woods. I don't think they understand the benefit.
But I don't think you can't sell it from a logical perspective in that way. Like, you're not, it's like trying to tell a kid like, you should eat your vegetables because you'll grow up to be big and strong. And it's like, that's not really.
But it's not about that. It's not just about the average rider, though. It's about people that are working in this space to educate and to help people understand why it's important as well. The average rider, people have got a choice about what, how they live the world. We can't dictate to everybody that EDI is for everyone. That's never going to be the case.
It feels like there's a lot of top-down work and not so much bottom-up, and you kind of need both to have that progress. But
that's where the Trails Associations, I see, and that's where the grassroots communities can come in and really push upwards as well. But it's like what Eliot's saying. I mean, we just need to sell it. I think we can sell it in any way we can, because and everybody's values, morals are different. So whether it's business that drives you, whether it's that social impact, whether it's the economic impact, there's many benefits that the EDI can bring, but it depends on what context you're working in and who you're working with. That you can convince them that actually this is a good thing to do. I mean, for us, it's simple. It's a social impact. We want to see change. We just want to see people out there and cycling in a way that benefits all of us, because it's good for our mental health, it's good for our physical health, it's good for our social connection. They're really simple, but unfortunately in this world, that's not enough to say that we just want to be equal, and we want to have opportunities, and because of the colour of our skin, we don't have those opportunities, and we're fighting hard to work to create that equality.
Yeah, I think too, one of the ways I think about this is like really simplifying it, is you have I can do that. I'm a pro. Broadcast guy. It's like from a simplistic angle, I think about it as like, there's kind of three groups that have a lot of influence. You have the communities that you want to affect. These are the people that we want to bring in. We want to have a good time. It's not just Black and brown people, it's everyone. And then you have the communities that are already there. And so like, I would say that this is your average rider. I'm already participating. And then you have the leadership, and they have a lot of influence as well. The companies that are making decisions, governments, like all of these different things. And so these are kind of your three buckets of influence. I would say that on both ends, you can make the most change. And so like, what we're doing with Grow Cycling is really, really focusing on that community aspect. How can we give them the tools to navigate these spaces, want to participate in these spaces? If there's a kid who's looking good on the pump track, I'm going to connect them with Seb and like try to get them a ride and whatever, so they can be pump track world champ. And so we can have that. That's kind of that empowerment thing, right? How do we empower them? And then from the leadership, like kind of I had a discussion with Electronic Arts and their kind of DEI group, And they were saying everything that they do has to have an executive sponsor, because if you thought about me as being Inglewood's kind of executive sponsor in that way, if there's no way for those kids to make progress upward, then they will always hit a ceiling. And this is the same in an organization as well. And so you can influence a lot from like bottom up and top down. The people that are the hardest is like the existing people. And I think that a lot of focus gets put there from the outside, but I think that that's the place that should get the least focus, because at the end of the day, you're saying, how can I change someone's mind? And that is just it's impossible, right? And so like, there's no, I'm already riding, like when we talk about that, you hear those people say like, oh, the outdoors is fine, right? Like I'm just riding a bike, like I don't want to have to think about this stuff. That is my experience. And so for me to try to logically say, no, but listen, and like, it's just not going to work. And so you actually can influence them by, that was kind of what that empowerment thing was like, if there's a ton of Black and brown people and adaptive riders on the trails, then it becomes normal. And that is just what cycling is. And so I think one more point about the normalcy is like, that is, to me, the biggest way that we can change things is to make it normal. How does it become like just so normal that it's like, oh, there's a woman riding, there's an adaptive rider, there's a Black person, like, oh, that's like that right now, that's novel. But if we just see that all the time, then it becomes normal, and that middle group of the existing cyclists like won't think anything about it, and that's just what cycling is.
And that's what will change the behaviour or understanding of the average rider, right?
I completely agree. I guess what I'm thinking about is like, would the experience of the person of colour or gender or whatever person coming into that space be better if the people already in that space had some vision of the future that was positive in their head? Like when we have more of these.
I don't think you can.
You can.
You can't. I mean, like for you, like you are a person that has that vision, and so like you can go and make change, right? Like you could think of you as having influence, but like to say to somebody who's not bought in, like that you need to have this. I don't think I've never seen that happen.
And I think it's also
there's some really bad ways to do that.
I've been not bought in. Like I haven't always been bought in. That's what.
And so then like
I've gone from I went in my old company. I went on diversity training in my first week, and I made a comment to my boss. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be a bit less racist.
But
so that's my view on that topic.
What's changed for you then through that journey?
So
Share that with us.
Diversity training was really, really good for starters, and part of that was understanding the benefits, but that was more in a corporate, like you're saying, like C-suite kind of some figures and stuff. And then just like that got me thinking, and then I started reading more and learning more and meeting more people in those groups, and it's just been a progression from there, I guess. But it feels like we need a shove sometimes, or a trigger to make us like I want to understand it more. Yeah, it is, but I'm just wondering if there's ways to push more people in that direction to have that experience.
I think that's a little bit hard to push people into, but what we can do is we can continue to speak and be that voice, in our group that we ride with, the company that we're in with, and just continue to have those open conversation and dialogue. Because it's going to be, like everybody here is agreeing, like it's going to be hard to change individuals' perspective. A few months ago, one of my team members did an interview with CBC Radio, which is like our national broadcasting radio. And I got a message from one of my followers. It's like, hey, Judy, we heard your group member interview is really great, but the most amazing thing was my mom actually called me to tell me about Color the Trails and like the amazing work you're doing. Notice, when I was talking to my mom about this diversity and inclusion a couple of years ago, my mom refused to acknowledge that there's problem in the outdoors. So for the longest time, like she refused. She says anybody can just go out there and do things. Like she refused to see the problem. But because I've been having this dialogue with her for the last couple of years, now she's like really excited and she's learned something and her perspective has changed. Like we're not going to change people's perspective, in a 1 or 2 post, whatever that we want to do. It's going to take a long time. And it's revolve dialogue or involve like having those hard conversations and continue to just like be that person who's just like bringing it up. And I say that to like for a lot of like my guy friends, it's like, what are you saying? Like, you know, when you're hanging out with your group of guys, like, are you making sure like jokes are not sexist? Are you calling people out on those sexist jokes or whatever racist jokes that, you know, you're making like when women are not present? So I think it's the same thing. Like, are you having those conversations when there's no diverse people present with your group of friends that you relate to? So having that ongoing conversation would eventually change. Like, you know, if people are open, change is willingness to open, you know, but it's all individual.
And
That's kind of one of the hardest things sometimes. You know, my nephew has Down syndrome, and the R word it's a painful word. And they've got friends that will throw it out there, and it's like, hey man, like, and I go, oh, sorry, you know, but the same thing, you know, the sexist sort of thing, you know, start pushing against that against your friends. You know, that's the hard part that I think we're referring to. It's, you know, it's hard to ask the question and you know, to gain your. Okay, you missed it. We need a new badge. We need the ignorance badge.
You're gonna need a lot of those.
I'll take it.
See what I can do.
But then also, within your own social group, to be that person that's sort of pushing back, like, because you feel it and you know it's the right way to go, but it's still.
I think
hard.
this kind of the way that I kind of think about this and influence as a whole, and same with the work that we're doing, is like who has the most trust. And so me, as kind of this outside influence, if we think about like the group of existing cyclists, I have no trust with them whatsoever, and so I have no influence. And like trust is super fascinating because like I can do the exact same thing with trust and without trust and have a different outcome. So if you are walking down the street and somebody's like, yo, you need a ride? And you're like, no, thank you. Like, I'm probably good. But like, if you're my best friend, I'm like, oh my God, you came to pick me up. And so in these situations, a lot of the time, the trust is this individual relationship. And so like, as an individual, I can actually have a ton of influence because I can call somebody out. And you calling them out is much better than me calling them out, even if I have credentials. And so from an individual standpoint, I think that kind of middle group of existing cyclists gets influenced by whoever has the most trust, which it can be their friends, it can be a company and things like that. And then when we think about like on a more broad scale, like a brand has trust, different organizations, you know, Judy has a lot of trust built up with her community. And so I think if you're trying to do things, that's why it's really difficult to make impact at scale, because it's really hard to build trust at scale.
Yeah. One thing is like the leadership word you used twice for half an hour, and we're all leaders in our community, and leaders are born, like you're all a leader in your own life, being younger, and then grew older, you just establish more leadership towards project and inputs about what's passionate about what you're doing. So we just have to like have the courage of telling things and just living that new open discussion and just keep on going. And we said it before, like just being genuine and assuming that we're gonna do maybe some mistakes and not just going forward with our leadership and not looking back, but just going, and people, and that discussion is gonna happen.
Yeah.
In 10 years, yeah. No, but that's how we are in our
Absolutely.
community. We're leaders, and people like believe in what we do and say. So let's just do
I
this.
think the bike industry has a really great opportunity to showcase other industries what it means to be leading these conversations in these opportunity. Because at the end of the day, despite all of the flaws that's within the industry, but I do find the mountain biking industry has embraced Color the Trails and has embraced our community way more than I would say the ski industry has, more so than I would say with other industry has. I just feel like there's way more acceptance or more support if we need stuff. There's just like that willingness to be like, yeah, come along, right? And I think it's really cool to, like, you know, last year, maybe some of you have seen it, like we had, like prior to that for a year, we were kind of communicating with Remy Mathieu, who lives up in Squamish. just like, on Instagram talking, and then when BLM happened, he kept sharing our stuff, which kind of helped us grow and people recognize us. But the one thing is he invited us to come ride with him. He's like, I'll give you guys a private lesson. And this is year 1 into mountain biking. We're like, okay, we figured out which trail would be appropriate for our crew. Everybody trained for the year to kind of be ready for this. And then him just like inviting us and embracing us and giving us that lesson and riding one of Squamish really tough trails and how to ride rock slabs and stuff like that. Like that already like reaffirmed like, like that embrace within the mountain biking culture. Cause I was nervous to even look at Pink Bike's comment. I was like, I don't want to read it because I go on Pink Bike, I'm like, this is just horrible. But like the feedback that video got on Pink Bike was amazing because people are like, whoa, it's really great to see you ride with new riders. It's really great to see, like, I can't believe it's been a year and they're already hitting those features. That's insane. So like, I think we always have to we underestimate like the power that we all have in terms of bringing others along, and then other people will see and be like, oh wow, okay, that it is possible. And that video with Remy was really great. People are like, let's do part 2. We want to see where they are now, So those are the kind of thing what I found, like the bike industry has such a huge opportunity to really lead in this area compared to most other industry that I'm working with. So
I think there's 2 words that kind of are the key part of basically this whole movement to me, is that the normalization part, right?
Yeah.
Like that is number 1. You
Yeah.
just keep making it more and more normal to see people of color on the trails, to see people in ads, to see just everything that happens around the whole thing. And then it's just like the kids that are growing up today, we are all old bike professionals that have been in the industry for a long time, where it was so predominantly white. And now it's changing very quickly, very drastically, but it creates some of these problems that we're talking about now. But the kids that are growing up now, they're just going to start seeing more kids on the trails. It's just going to be a normal thing.
Yeah.
My kids went to an elementary school in San Francisco called Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy, which is the most San Francisco public school in the world. Right? Like it's so San Francisco. And it was a civil rights book. It's the elementary school, public elementary school, and from kindergarten on, they learned about civil rights, treating people all the same, and not, and understanding racism and how to battle racism and all these things. And so my kids have grown up now where like there's no awkwardness. They're not challenged by anything. They don't have to sit there and like when people say, oh, you're too woke, it's not, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, and they go, and so when my daughter was going to college, when we're going around and we're looking at universities, and she's like, that college is way too white, I'm not going there, and she's searching out places where she can be more diverse. She ended up in Chicago, which is very diverse, and that kind of thing is just going to happen from the growth of the youth. Like a lot of what we're doing now, and a lot of what all of us are trying to do is deal with a quick change, and that's brings me to my second one, is patience. We're just going to have to be patient with this. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be a thing that I can do today that's going to affect everything tomorrow. It's kind of like the long-term thing of building things like, and I do want Eliot to talk more about Pump Track because you didn't really talk about the whole community element.
Sure.
But like things like that yes, we can build a Pump Track, but how is that going to sustain to keep kids coming back in the future?
Following up on that, long term, and our kids and our youth. We could use more diversity in the outdoor rec industry, in the cycling industry, in all the different positions of jobs in land management. So how do we create opportunities to educate our youth on all the opportunities that are available out there to be a land manager, to be a forester, to be a trail builder, a GIS specialist, some type of ologist, while they still have outdoor rec experience, to change the whole idea. We have a lot of somebody using blue hairs, gray hairs the other day.
Oh yeah.
We have a lot of white people in land management agencies that have a very narrow vision of recreation, conservation, environment, and people. And we need youth to move into those positions that have open minds, broad minds, and can be really inclusive. So can we start talking about career paths and
Absolutely.
opportunities early with our kids in all our programs? Like, you can do that, you can do that, you can do that, and you can create an impact and change in this world. Like your kids going to that public school, they had a change, or they developed without.
For them, it wasn't even a change.
It wasn't
It
even
was
change.
normalized from the moment they got there until they were adults.
But we can learn a lot from the younger generation, right? We can learn a lot from the younger generation. So it is important to get their voice in this, because you're right, it's totally normalized for them. But you're right about the career paths and thinking about what's the entry level for people from diverse backgrounds, for underrepresented groups to come into the industry. And think about it as a choice for employment, and thinking about could we be thinking about apprenticeships, internships, working with organisations that were like Colour the Trails, to actually come and see what it's like to work in the industry. And that then goes back to Eliot's point around that diversity within organisations and being able to have that diverse voice. And that then also helps you to perform better as an organisation, as a company. So it has that knock-on effect, but like what you're saying, it's a slow process, but we have to accelerate it now. We have to accelerate it, and that's about every single one of us in this room being that leader, to call it out, to push it forward, because if we can do that collectively, think about the impact that that's going to have. We can't do it alone. We cannot do it alone, and it cannot be for those that are underrepresented to be the only voice. That sometimes I get people come to me and say, well, I'm a white guy, I don't know what to do. What can I do? I feel that it's not my place to say anything, but it absolutely is. It's everybody's place to be able to help us push forward. And if we can work together, work collaboratively, then we will start to see that change. The movement is growing. Think about our organisations now, and thinking about connecting with those communities to change the demographic within our organisations too.
Sorry, I feel like I cut Chris off.
Sorry, I cut off you.
And Eliot has a career board now, right?
Oh, sure. Okay, so I guess that
And you start.
I'll hit 2 points.
I'm gonna give us a little bit of like a 2 to 3 to 5 minute
Yeah.
warning.
I'll finish maybe.
2 minutes, because that's.
That's why I said 2 to 3 to 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll finish on the bump track bit, but I think with the careers piece, that was one of the reasons why I highlighted the relationship with Santa Cruz, because I think one of the ways to think about a lot of these different groups is a proxy for different cultures. And so when we say like Black people, the reason that is hard to get Black people in is because it's a different culture. And so then if we said, okay, well, if it's a different culture, like the lived experience is different, the way that I've come up is different. And so if I were to put my resume on LinkedIn, or I guess it's on LinkedIn, I'm not qualified to do any of the things that I do. And so I was an athlete. And so you would see like, okay, well, you're an athlete. You have no broadcast experience. You've never done anything like this. And then here is Red Bull that says, yeah, like we're going to put you in front of a couple million people and you're going to talk about this thing. And then like from a marketing perspective, I was telling Scotty like this company just offered me like a director of corporate partnerships role. And I don't have any experience in that way. But the reason that they offered me this role was because that is what I do, right? I'm an athlete. And so what I do is sell myself as an athlete to corporations. What I do as a nonprofit founder is connect corporations and nonprofits and all of these things. And so I have decades of experience in this situation. But if you're thinking about putting people in a box in terms of inviting people in, and I think like, yes, like there are entry-level opportunities, but there are also higher-level opportunities if you think about people in a more holistic way, that I have this experience in these things that I might be in disparate parts, but I have to actually, as the employer, do the work to say, man, this person is really sharp in this way. This is really sharp in this way. is real easy to show people how to work Salesforce, and they're gonna kill it in this role. So I think that that's kind of on us as the people in industry, in leadership, like I talked about, to bring these people in and say, what are the skills that I can use? Because there are so many people that might not fit the cookie cutter way that we think about employment.
Yep.
And then in terms of the pump track, Scotty, I guess, what do you want me to talk about? Like, just why did
I think just describing it as just we're building a pump track is underselling it.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Can I just say before, like, just to connect with what you were saying, think about it, when we talk about employment, we think about who's the right fit. But if you can think about who's the right mix and just change your thinking about who should be represented in our workforces, because when we think about who's the right fit, unpick that. That means, are we just thinking about people like ourselves? Are we employing people like ourselves all the time? So it's almost like you have to accept that you have to look at things differently, and think about ways in which you can bring people in that potentially don't have that opportunity. So. Sorry, back to the pump track.
On the career thing, I think it's like cycling feels like it feels like such a barrier. Like as a child, or as a kid, people loved cycling. It was like, I'm going to work in a bike shop, or I'm going to be a professional racer, or I can't really do those things very well. So that's it. And just actually to demonstrate what's available. Like I wanted to do a careers day, and it just happened to be my job changed, so I never got the opportunity to do it. So in Sheffield, I know S&C coaches, physios, all those things that are linked to cycling. Mm-hmm. And I worked in a lot of private communities and just wanted to show kids that they could do these things, and they love riding bikes, and you can do a job, and actually to combine the passion for them to actually then realise that they could, you're going to study now, but there's that job there, and actually to have people talk. So it's like all these people, the idea was to bring everyone and they could talk about, like Joe Bowman, for example, hasn't been in film school. He's never, he probably studies quite, he reads around it a lot now, but actually there's different ways of getting there. It's not that it's just grafted, like you say, Eliot. It's like you've just got yourself in the right place at the right time, but there's so many opportunities there, and I think sometimes almost just opening it out and saying, you can do so many different things, and you can combine your passions. And you might be, an accountant, but you can still work in life.
Totally.
There's all those jobs are still there, and you can link the two together, and sometimes just opening people up to that sort of thing and just saying, go for it.
Totally. That definitely connects with one of the things that we're trying, one of our big goals with the pump track. But I think to that point, it's not just outside the industry that we have this idea, it's inside. We had a meeting with the marketing director at Vans, and he said, when I was growing up, I wish somebody would have told me that I could still work in skateboarding and not be a professional skateboarder, that there are all of these other jobs. And so we kind of think about this in many different ways. We hold ourselves back and we hold other people back. And totally. And so when you think about that problem is relatively difficult from two sides. And so with the pump track, we said, the impetus was how do we build this access point that has everything around it that is needed. And so we said, okay, we need to put it in a public park because it needs to be safe. We don't want to, actually people said, I've got this patch of land. How do you get to the patch of land? Where's the parking? Who's going to take care of it? And so we said, okay, we need it to be in a public park so that it's safe. We also need it to be in a public park because there needs to be entry points to it. Transportation, how do I get there? Is it safe for me to ride there? The other reason we need it to be in a public park, and one of the ways we sell it is we need to make this aspirational. It can't just be a piece of dirt, because who wants to ride around on a piece of dirt? It needs to be beautiful. It needs to be amazing. And so we've got one of the things that we've done is partnered with this landscape architecture company who's amazing. They've been on the cover of Architectural Digest and making it a piece of art so that when I come there, I want to have this ownership of it. I want to participate in this thing, which also kind of says how do I create desire for this sport? I love art already as this culture and as this community. And so we can combine cycling infrastructure with art, which makes it more interesting to participate in. And then as I was kind of talking about the activation piece, how do you then expose people? like Chris, you were kind of talking about like how do we push people in a direction. I think about it as like how do you expose people to opportunities? And so we want people to say, yes, there are different opportunities here that I had never thought about. So an example of this is like, you have this asset and how can you use it? And so we said, well, there's all of these different companies. Like, for example, there's 2 partnerships that I think are really interesting with Verve Coffee. And so we'd say, okay, let's have an event at the pump track where Verve Coffee comes in. People like coffee already, right? So you're taking this existing behavior. Let's do a pop-up there, have free coffee, have some music playing, you have a good time at the pump track. But then in addition to that, Verve has locations in Los Angeles. And so we can say you can be a barista. We can have leadership opportunities to go and work at Verve. And that happens through this connection with the bike. And so another one that I think is really interesting is like the UCLA partnership that I was talking about. And so you have people coming into the industry and getting not only introduced to cycling, but also introduced to opportunities that would happen in cycling. And so I was talking to somebody specialized a long time ago, and they were talking about like data collection activities, say how many people are riding these bikes and things like that. And so we have some interns from UCLA who are working on what it means to collect data. And you would think about bike companies being able to say, who's using our bikes? Who's riding this? What are the people who are here? How many people are riding the pump track? And that's a really interesting data science question for somebody who would have never thought about cycling. I never thought I could be a data scientist in the cycling world. And so I think the pump track for us represents this place to have people coming from the community into the world of the outdoors or in cycling, people coming in from places that would have never thought about cycling as a viable opportunity from, I think a lot of people think of it as lower, but also from higher, right? Like I could also go and work at Snapchat or Google or Gucci or Supreme or whatever. And then the other piece of that is the city donated a building to us. And so we're gonna renovate it and use it as this kind of community hub. And so I think for us, we also partnered with this incredible world famous designer who's been on the cover of every magazine ever, to say, what does it look like to create, again, like this cultural experience here? And the reason we're trying to connect all of these things is because you have to take something that I already do, something that is already part of my culture, and combine it with this new activity that is that exposes you to all the opportunities. So that core question underneath there is like, why would I want to participate in the cycling world in the first place? And I think you answer that by like making it actually desirable, making it where it's fun, making it where my friends do it, and all of these things. And so this kind of like centerpiece for us is just a way to build an ecosystem, and I think also learn so that we can, if you guys come to us and say, hey, we're building a pump track, we can say, cool, you guys should talk to the school board over here, maybe a local barbecue place or something like that, and share that learning so that that you don't have to start from scratch.
I think that's my cue. That was awesome. I feel like we should just like